Okay, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of phonics and what it is and how we teach it and why we teach it, and a little bit of a background into what came before phonics. It's a bit of a mixed bag today, but I'm also going to hopefully get you guys to understand on your own why we teach Jolly Phonics the way we do. Now, let me just begin by saying my channel is not an official Jolly Phonics channel. I think you should know that. It's English with J. I work with Jolly Phonics, but my channel is not a Jolly Phonics channel. If you wish to see the real Jolly Phonics channel, it's really good. It's called Jolly Learning on YouTube. They've got a couple of hundred videos right now, 125 videos, I think. They're doing really well. It looks great. All right. On that video, on that channel, you're going to see loads of cool videos, loads of instructionals with the authors and with various trainers from around the world and people using the product in real life. Okay. I'm an advocate of it completely. So I really want you guys to go and check that out. Okay. So let's get into it. Let's begin with the old way of learning literacy. Okay. The way it used to be taught. They used to use a technique called the whole word teaching, right? They'd learn the whole word way of learning, where the students would be presented with a word, and they'd be CAT, cat. And the idea being that if they're exposed to that word frequently enough, with enough repetition, that the students will learn the word. Now that's kind of memorization, really. That's not really reading, is it? It's just memorizing that CAT equals the word cat, and there's a picture of a cat. I don't really get into it too much, but it isn't reading in any sense. You're not going to be able to read a word you've never seen before. You're only going to be able to read words that you've memorized, and you're not reading them, you're repeating them. And also, if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that C, A, and T are the names of the letters, not sounds. Okay, so that would be one way it used to be taught, that children would be given sight words, regularly be given a word to look at with a picture, and they'd guess that what they're reading represents the picture they are being shown. And the important word there is guess, right? They're not actually knowing it, they're guessing it based on the image they're shown. I'll get into that in a minute. They would also talk about word shapes, the way the word looks in its shape. This again, I have an issue with this. It's kind of teaching children to look at English like a pictogram language, like Chinese or Japanese or cuneiform or something like that, because that's asking them to remember the image of a word. Now, English doesn't need to be taught that way. English is phonetic. It can be decoded at the individual phoneme level, the individual sound level. So that's kind of using the wrong tool to crack the nut, as it were. There was also, using CVC families, consonant, vowel, consonant, CVC. This is more analytical phonics, where the student sits top down, they're looking at the word, and they're looking for patterns in that word. The at family, it is a word family, the o, ag family, the an, the at. And students are encouraged to look for what we call onset and rhyme. The onset being the initial sound of the word, k, b, m, h, r. The heavy schwa sound, k, b, m, the heavy schwa sound, which I don't use. And then the rhyme. The onset is the initial sound, and the rhyme is the at, b, at, bat, k, at, cat. And students are encouraged to look for these patterns and analyze how the word looks. Again, that's top down. It's not giving the students the core essential skill required to read any word given to them once they've learned the phoneme grapheme relationship, the sound and the written letter relationship. If you can do it that way, students can approach words they've never seen before, all right, which has many more effects on their learning, which we'll get into a little bit as well. Let me give you an example of how this top-down approach can often involve guessing and misunderstanding. So let's look at this. This example now comes directly from a video that's on the Jolly Learning YouTube channel, where Sarah and Yvonne, Sarah Werner, one of the authors, and Yvonne, the training consultant, discuss how guessing is a bad idea when learning to guess at things. Because if you teach a child to look at that and you say to them, I see a red car, and they look at the picture, and they would figure out logically that what they're reading, I see a red car, what they're saying relates directly to the picture. And they'll be encouraged to look for the pattern there in that sentence, right? So then you might show them picture number 2, and it says, I see a green car. That would logically make sense. But they're not reading the individual words. They are putting them and slotting them into the pattern you've asked them to identify. You're not actually asking them to decode at the phonemic individual sound level what they're reading. So when you then show them picture number 3, they're likely to say, I see a red car, I see a gray car, a silver car, I see a blue car, because it makes sense. They can still see the I see and they can still see the word car, even if they're not actually decoding them completely. They might have memorized that pattern. But now we're not asking the same question. We're asking a different question. How many cars can you see? So that's just a basic run through how that used to be taught. Now, let's just unpack that long sentence at the bottom there, systematic synthetic phonics, that long phrase. It's phonics because we're dealing with the relationship between the written form, the grapheme as it's called, and the sound, the phoneme. It's synthetic because we're beginning at the smallest possible unit of speech, the sound. And you are asking children to blend them together to synthesize the word. It's not C-A-T and it's not k-at, it's k-at. You're giving them the skills. And it's systematic because we begin with the easiest, lowest common denominator, and we slowly increase complexity in a systematic, incremental way. We'll get into the reason why that's important in a minute as well, because it's very important that when you teach reading or phonics or literacy, it's done systematically. And there's a very good reason for that. Okay, and that's down to the complexity of English. So this, what we call SSP, Systematic Synthetic Phonics, that's what Jolly Phonics is an example of. It's used in over 150 countries. Okay, and in the UK, in Ireland, it was actually embedded into the government policy that we have to teach systematic synthetic phonics as part of our literacy program. And it's been used in many countries, and Jolly Phonics is kind of the original and the best loved. It's written by teachers for teachers. It's very teacher friendly, very child friendly, very user friendly, and very, very effective and quick to get going. It starts very quickly getting the kids up with their fluency. All right, we'll go into this a little bit more. Independent research, it's independently proven. Okay, now there's many different studies. I'm not going to go into them too much today, but let me just mention PEARLS for a moment. PEARLS stands for Progress in International Reading Literacy Study. It's independent. It's not from Jolly Phonics, right? And it looked at countries that have embedded SSPs, Systematic Synthetic Phonics, into their syllabus and their global development. Now, specifically Singapore, Ireland, Hong Kong, and England, which are on opposite sides of the plate there, the opposite side of those you know, the planet, they are geographically as far apart as you can get, really. However, they've all been using SSPs, and you can see that their literacy levels are rising and rising and rising. So Ireland being number 2 under Singapore in the last 5 years. Okay, it's also worthy of note that the States in 2011 were in the top 5 or 6, but they've now dropped off the list altogether, and they're still heavily dependent on whole word reading strategies. And they are only recently coming to grips with the idea that SSPs is far more productive. Okay, so we're not going to spend too much time on that today. Just to let you know that it's all out there to be looked at. The simple view of reading, what we call the science of reading, based on this. This way of viewing reading came up in the 80s, I think, and it basically, on the horizontal axis here, you've got poor reading abilities, inability to decode words, and inability to understand phoneme, grapheme relations, sound-letter relationships. Going all the way up, so it's that way for you guys, going all the way up to good decoding abilities. And then the vertical is your language comprehension. Now, the thing that's important about this is they are mutually inclusive, okay? They are mutually dependent. So, for example, if you are very good at reading letters and sounds and words and putting them together and encoding them and decoding them and synthesizing them, but you have no idea what you're reading, you're not literate. You can make out the sounds, but you're not literate in that media. All right. So, for example, I once taught a Canadian fella to read the Thai language very quickly. He was very good at it, but he never wanted to learn to speak Thai. So he could read menus and anything you showed him, but he didn't understand what he was reading. So he was illiterate in that sense. And the opposite's true. You could have full knowledge of a language, You could be completely fluent in a language, English, Thai, Chinese, anything. But if you can't encode and decode it and you don't have the phonic skills required, you're illiterate still. Right. So, I mean, people fall anywhere in one of these four quadrants, depending on their situation. A better way of kind of representing this is by called the Scarborough Rope by Hollis Scarborough. This was obviously in the early 2000s. And he referred to solid reading being like a rope made up of different strands. And it's made up of two main substrands, your language comprehension and your ability to recognize words. It could be your phonic awareness or your phonic abilities, right? And each of those are made up of substrands. So if we take this as our goal, the skilled reader, not just someone who can read, but someone who understands what they're reading, someone that can enjoy reading, someone that has reading part of their life, somebody that has personal development from their reading. They can read something, understand it, and develop from it. That's a skilled reader, right? They need to have these two strands. They need to have their understanding of language become increasingly more strategic. The idea is you can understand the meaning of a word by context. You encounter a new word that you hear or you read, and you're like, oh, what's that? You don't necessarily need to look it up. You have strategies, right? You put it into context, you use analogy, you understand the meaning through your strategic understanding of language. And the blue strand, which is your phonic abilities, they become increasingly automatic. So they're ingrained in your brain. It doesn't mean you're sight reading, but you are reading by sight. You're not doing sight words like the old way, but you're looking at a word and recognizing it intrinsically, like immediately, organically. Let me unpack that a little bit. Language comprehension, you'll see the 5 points here, starting with a pale red, going to a deeper and darker red as they become more ingrained and more valuable, as it were, I suppose, is one way of saying it. That's probably not the right way, really. But anyway, background knowledge. Do you understand anything about the language you're reading and you're listening to? Do you understand what's your background? Do you understand that this is Thai, this is English, this is Chinese? Yeah. Vocabulary, the breadth and the depth of your knowledge. Do you understand lots of synonyms? Do you know 10 ways to say hot? Do you know 5 ways to say scared? Do you understand if you were reading or writing and it said, stop, said the girl? Or you could change said, right? It could be stop, screamed the girl, stop, cried the girl, stop, laughed the girl. And that would have very important impact on what is being conveyed, right? I mean, stop, screamed the girl implies terror and fear. And stop, laughed the girl implies she might be being tickled, she might be told a funny joke that she can't stop laughing at. And it will affect your understanding of what you're reading. Language structures, do you understand the grammar of what you're saying? You know, I mean, red car, big is it. That's not going to work. It is a big red car. They need to be in the right order, subject, object. In my personal experience, I live in Thailand, as I say, and people often say to me, oh, Jay, you can speak Thai. And they mean it as a question, but they say it, Jay, you can speak Thai. And they use the rising inflection to imply the question. That's a strategy they've come up with because their grammar is weak. People always come up with strategies to get around communication, which is a good thing in many ways. But to be completely accurate, you have to get the strategy of knowing your grammar correct. Is it and it is? Can you and you can? Different meanings. Verbal reasoning refers to your understanding of slang and idioms and, you know, implied meaning. If you were taking a CEFR placement test for the upper levels, B1, B2, it would say something like person A and person B talking. Person A says, can I get a minute of your time? Person B, I've got to fly in 5 minutes, but I can give you some time now. Something like that. And it's like, can the person fly? Does person number 1 need only 60 seconds? No, they're asking for a short period of time. What is person number 2's meaning? I will give you some time in 5 minutes. I'm getting on a plane in 5 minutes, or I have a little bit of free time now, then I have to go. Right? That's your understanding of the language and literacy knowledge. How much exposure to different forms of literature do you get? Newspapers, songs, books, poems, limericks, and there's a plethora of media out there. You need to have multiple exposure to multiple varieties of that, which will then weave, like the rope, with your word recognition skills. You'll see they go from light blue to dark blue. Phonological awareness. Phonological awareness, your knowledge of the grapheme, which is the letter, and the phoneme, which is the sound, the relationship. Are you able to identify two letters making a single sound? Are you able to encode and decode them? Decoding would be your ability to use that phonological awareness, your segmentation and your blending skills. But again, none of this means anything if you don't understand what you're reading. And then eventually sight recognition of familiar words. It doesn't mean we're learning it the old-fashioned way, sight words, apple, A-double-P-L-E, apple, A-double-P-L-E. No. What it means is you've decoded the word using your phonological skills enough times and with enough frequency and enough regularity that it's embedded in your brain and you know the shape of the word just by having read it so many times. So if I say the word discussion, immediately the word discussion comes to your mind, right? But you don't read it in your mind by spelling it D-I-S-S. Your mind will actually phonologically skim through it super fast. Discussion, but at hyper speed. And you know exactly how that's written. And an example of that for me would be the amount of times someone says, hey, Jay, how do you spell receipt? One of those, right? I before E unless after C, unless it's always after C. I don't know. I mean, it's never I before E, right? That's the exception, not the rule, whatever. If someone says to you, how do you spell receipt? Rather than just spelling it straight out, it's often easier for me to go, wait a minute, let me grab a pen. You write it down, then you spell it. That's kind of exemplifying how the science of reading and how your brain works with reading. Scarborough Rope, look into it. Now, the old way, CAT, is very negative for ESL, English as a Second Language learners, CAT, 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 CAT. I'm not going to get into that too much today. It's not really the point, but it's a very bad way of teaching vocabulary, okay, for ESL. There's many more ways of doing vocab acquisition for ESL students. Phonics will teach your students thought processes. Phonics will teach your students skills that they need. For example, confidence. Your students will have confidence in their own abilities because they will be able to read new words independently without having to wait for a teacher to spoon feed them one at a time. CAT, cat, DOG, dog, MOUSE, mouse. This is empowering students with the gift or with the ability and skill set to go ahead and independently learn. I mean, it's that classic Lao Tzu quote, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him how to catch fish. He'll never know hunger. You feed him for a lifetime, right? Reading is not a natural act, especially English being very complicated in its structure. But reading is something that came about just 5, 6, 7,000 years ago. But humans have been on the planet for 200,000 or 300,000 years in this form and much, much longer in other forms. We've always communicated verbally, body language, eye contact, many different ways. But writing only came up recently. Therefore, it needs to be taught in a structured way. It can't just be randomly taught. You will confuse your students or your children. Now, some questions you may never have asked yourself. You might have, I don't know, but maybe not. Let's have a look. Which of these do you think was written by the younger child? Picture A, with the lines and the kind of structured images, or B, random, well, not random, but circles, scribbles like that. Which do you think would be the 2.5 or the 3-year-old, and which do you think is the 3.5 or 4-year-old? I would say that the younger child is child B, because that is an easier, natural act than actual straight lines. Yeah, they're going to do zigzags and other stuff, but actual direct straight lines and hatching and boxing, that's much more challenging. And they don't get to that level until a year or so after the scribble stage. All right. So with that knowledge in mind, I want you to come to your own conclusions. Which of these letters would be easier for the child to write? The capital A or the lowercase a? I would posit the lowercase a. We've already agreed that these lines are easier to come with, to develop. Having said that, the next question is, which of these letters is more frequently used in language? Do you write in capitals or do you write in lowercase? Of course, we write in lowercase. You generally only have one capital per sentence unless there's a proper noun in the sentence. So, having said that, we can conclude that we should be teaching lowercase letters, not capitals. I see a lot of my first words books and it's all in capitals and I don't understand why. Because you don't read in capitals, you don't write in capitals, and it's not the first skill your muscles, your small, fine motor skills will be developing. Okay, next, let's have another concept real quick. You could watch this simple song, and I'm not going to play it because I'm sure I'll get flagged on YouTube, but it's Old MacDonald, right? Old MacDonald has a farm. Yeah. What sound does a cow make? Yeah, you can go ahead and watch the video. If I won't play it now, but you can go ahead and look at that super simple songs. They're really good. But what sound? Oh, sorry, let's do another. What's the name of that first animal? It's a cow. What sound does a cow make? Moo. Good. What's the second animal? The name is horse. Its sound, neigh. The third animal is a name is a pig, and its sound is oink. So you can conclude that certain things can have names and sounds and images. We've got pictures, names, and sounds. It's not that unfamiliar to a child. They get it. You can play a game of what's the name of the animal, what's the sound of the animal, what's the picture of the animal. Good. Well, let's have a think about letters then. What is a letter? A letter is no more than a picture, right? Here's a picture of the letter G. And there's a picture of a Thai letter on the other side, one of the Thai sounds. These have names. The English letter on that one side is G, and the Thai letter on the other side is Gai. It means chicken, but it's Gai. That's the name of it. And these pictures, which have names, also have sounds. The sound of the letter G is G, and the sound of the Gai is G. So in Thai and English, these two pictures have the same sound, different names. Very much like the letter C and K. They have a different picture, different name, but the same sound. Now, what's important to remember is the names are not that important, because when we're learning to synthesize a word, you don't spell it out. You don't spell the word cat in your head, C-A-T. In your head, you go cat, 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 and you relate it to your knowledge of what cats look like. So the names are not necessary. They are not needed when teaching phonics at the earlier stages. Especially stage 1, it's not needed. Probably by stage 2, stage 3, you would. But at the early stage, you don't need to use up your limited memory space with this stuff. Your working memory is not as big as you expect. So just keep it simple, keep the sounds of the letters and the images of the letters at the front. Question, easy question. How many letters in the English language? 26, easy, good. So how many sounds are there in English? Ooh, a bit more difficult. Bit more debatable as well, but there are at least 26, 42, at least 44, really, more, plus. But for the purposes of today's introduction, we'll talk about the main 42 sounds. Okay, so we've come to the conclusion that English language has only 26 letters, but with those 26 letters, we need to learn how to make over 42 sounds. That implies we need a systematic approach. That's where the S of SSP comes from. You need to systematically work through how we use 26 letters to create over 42 sounds. All right, here's an example from Jolly Phonics. There, the 42 sounds. You'll notice there are only 40 letters or 40 images here. That's because double O has the long and short, ooh, and TH has hard and soft. And please look to my other channel videos for more on that. We also have the 17 alternative spellings. It's very complicated. English is quite a complicated language. Therefore, your system needs to be very systematic. Now, let's try something else. Here's the current system that a lot of people are teaching their kids, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, that's great as a song to warm up your kids, but it's not going to help them to learn to read. Let's give you an example of how, if we just take it in the same standard order we always take, let's take the first 6 sounds or the first 6 letters from our standard alphabet of A, B, C, D, E, and F. If I was to give you for 40 seconds, how many 2, 3, or 4 letter words could you make? Yeah, have a look at it. Now, because we're on YouTube and this isn't a seminar, I don't need to give you 40 seconds. You can just pause the video. All right, you can just have a look, give yourself 40 seconds, and how many words do you think you can make? Okay, let's have a go. I'm not going to do it. But there's 6 3-letter words you could make. Bad, fed, cad, dad, fad, bed. You could have had feed, you could have had bead, but there's not too many words. Not very effective or efficient. You want to spend time learning 6 letters, 6 sounds, and at the end of it, you only get 6 or 7 words. Doesn't feel like you're making the most of your time. Let's try that same activity with these 6 letters. Okay, S, A, T, I, P, and N. Don't put them A and I together to make A, just in their single sound. S, A, T, I, P, and N. How many 2, 3, or 4-letter words could you make in 40 seconds? Give it a go. Okay, you pause the video. When you're ready, you can come back. And here's 30 words to begin with. And this is not including S at the end. You know, pans, tips, hips, taps. We could have added S to all of those, or most of those. And that's not including nonsense words, words that you make up just to practice the act of encoding and decoding. But these are all real words. So you've got 30 to 50 words there. That's a better bang for your buck. All right. Hopefully you're realizing yourself that this is more efficient. So that's just with the first 6 sounds. This is the reason why in Jolly Phonics, they teach the sounds out of the natural order. They take the 42 sounds and they put them into 7 groups of 6 sounds. Each group has 6 sounds and you work through them systematically. They've been chosen in this order for a number of reasons, ranging from most frequently used sounds that you can get the most words out of, to also letter formation. So for example, it's a good idea to learn the letter C before the letter D, because D is based on the letter C. So is A, but A is more useful. So we put it in the first group. But basically, learning and separating D and B by 5 or 6 letters is good. In the general alphabet, A, B, C, D, they're so close together. They're learned so close together in time that the kids often get confused. So we've split them up there. And then after group 3, we start getting into digraphs, which is 2 letters making 1 sound. No different than single letters. There's other videos about that. But after you get through the first 3 groups, how many words do you think you have access to as a teacher to work with your kids? You'd be surprised. Let me show you. Group 1 gives you over 30 words. Group 2 gives you another 60 words. That gives you over 90. And then group 3 gives you another 90 words. That gives you 180 plus words, like 200 plus words to play with. It doesn't mean the kids are going to be reading all of these words fluently yet, like encoding, decoding, but it does give you more to play with as a teacher. Gives you more meat on the bone, as I like to say. And all of them have been nicely organized for you in the phonics word book. So that's one of my little go-to handbooks there. So I don't need to sit with a pen going, oh, what words can I play with today? If you're not in the phonics word book, then I just go to the app. The app's perfect. The app's got all the words there for you to play with. Jolly Classroom is a really good app. We'll look at that in another video maybe. So in conclusion of my introduction to why we teach the way we teach, let's have a look. We have concluded as a work in progress today that lowercase letters are easier than capital case letters and more frequently used. Therefore, let's work with lowercase and don't worry about capitals at the beginning. We have realized that names are less important than sounds. All right? When it comes to encoding and synthesizing and decoding, you need to know the sounds of the letters, not the names. You only use names when spelling for other people to listen. And we're not at that. We're not talking about spelling. Okay. English has more sounds than letters. Let me just move this over. There are more sounds than we have letters. Therefore, we need a systematic approach to this type of synthetic phonics. It needs to be done in a given order. And we have also concluded that the traditional alphabet A, B, C, D, E, F, G is less effective and useful than the reordered 42 sounds into 7 groups of 6 letters and sounds. Okay, that is my basic introduction. I hope it was useful. There will be a follow-up video coming soon about how to go into deeper in phonics and the skills required. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.